The Joy in Goal Setting podcast is proud to be partnered with and brought to you by The Ideal Life. The Ideal Life offers a multimedia platform that is focused on cultivating a growth mindset. Here, you'll find a supportive community of coaches, valuable online resources, and transformative courses aimed at helping you lead a more gratifying and joyful life. Ready to take the next step in your personal growth journey? Visit theideallife.com to explore their wealth of resources and join their vibrant, growing community today. Welcome to the Joy in Goal Setting podcast, where we empower individuals to discover their purpose, achieve their goals, and experience a joyful life through encouraging conversations. I am your host, Hudson Dodds. Today, we're sitting down with Jamie Tozzi. Jamie is a former Microsoft executive, mother, and executive leadership coach. We discuss finding the balance between achieving work and family goals, stepping out in faith for a new job, and the pitfalls many people in leadership find themselves in. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us on the show. I'm so glad you're here.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Hudson.
Yeah. So we're in the new year recording, and a little off-the-cuff question. A lot of us set new goals and all these things for January and beyond. Curious, is there anything that you are particularly excited about in the new year, or something that maybe is a little bit unknown and scary for you?
Lots of new exciting things and scary things. But yesterday somebody asked me, what's the word I would describe for myself? What's my word for 2024? And that's intention. And so I'm just really focused on being way more intentional about everything in my life, my business practice, where I spend my time, my health, everything. So that's really what's exciting. Also what's exciting, we've got some good travel plans this year, which I'm excited about. Yeah. We always do, but this year will be even more special.
Where are y'all headed?
Well, we're going to go to Costa Rica in March, which is our new favorite place. And it's a place that over time we expect to spend more time with and have invested in a property. March, we're going to be in Nosara, and we're going to do a big surf vacation with the boys. I have 3 teenagers. And but then we're also going to visit where we bought our new property, which should be ready later this year, and that's in Reserva Conchal.
Awesome.
Yeah, on the West Coast.
No, I love Costa Rica. Is one of my favorite places in the world.
Beautiful people, amazing culture, and I'm so looking forward to just immersing myself in learning and contributing. So.
I don't remember if this is true still today, but a decade ago or so is the highest number of expats per capita, I think, of any country, which makes total sense.
It's because I think it's so beautiful, and it keeps winning all these awards, like best places to retire and best places to live. Mm-hmm. There's blue zones there. Yep. So I think that's only going to continue. Yeah, so maybe we're getting in on the semi-early side.
I know, it always happens. Like Charleston, and then all of a sudden it's no longer what made it so great.
Exactly.
Costa Rica is fantastic. That's so cool. Exciting for y'all.
Thank you.
Things on the horizon. So maybe start all the way kind of back. Where are you from? Where did you go to college? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm from right outside Philadelphia in Delaware County. So the very first exit off of I-95 when you get into Pennsylvania, those from that area will laugh when they hear me say that. I graduated at 17, moved to Boston, went to Boston College, and lived in Boston for 3 years post-college, moved to D.C., and then moved to Charleston.
Nice.
Yeah.
What were you doing in Boston after BC?
I got a great job with Coopers & Lybrand. In fact, it's a funny story. I didn't even really know what my job was. I was just so happy to be hired by a big 6 accounting firm at the time. So I did that. I was an auditor and did that, and was also a consultant for a few years, and then moved to D.C. and took a job in sales at Microsoft, and then spent nearly 20 years, most of my career at Microsoft, working my way from the ground up at 24, all the way up.
So did you go to school for accounting?
No, I was a marketing and communications major. And thankfully, the Boston office of Coopers & Lybrand at the time had this unique hiring practice. They wanted to hire a diverse set of skill sets and people with different backgrounds. So there was a business background like myself, not accounting. We had an anthropology major. We had a science major. So it was we were a little behind the curve at first, but I like to say we caught up quickly.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
So what kept you in Microsoft for that long?
It's funny. I left after 20 years, and now I'm more immersed with working with venture capitalist companies and high growth, smaller companies. And when they see my resume, they kind of look at me sideways and say, you're a dinosaur. Why were you staying at Microsoft for 20 years? And it made me realize, wow, that's the perception. But the reason I stayed is because it was always something new. I was in incubation businesses always. So always in businesses that were very new to Microsoft, where you had to build things. I'm a builder. Always big challenges. And frankly, I always kind of felt like I was flying on the seat of my pants a little bit during my time there. So that's what kept me there, energized. The people are amazing. I can't say enough great things about the Microsoft culture and the incredibly talented people I got to work with over the years.
Yeah. Well, the incubator side, it sounds like that was able to keep you feel like you're in a small business in a massive organization.
100%. That's what I said. We're like a really small business inside a really big, amazing, well-funded company, even though sometimes my business itself did not feel as well-funded.
Yeah. So what all were you doing in Microsoft?
What was I doing?
Yeah.
When I started at 24, I look back and I was so green, so to speak, and maybe even had some confidence issues back then. But I started, I will be forever grateful to Pam Salzer, who hired me as a sales rep with no sales experience. So I was a sales rep selling into small and mid-market accounts for the first time Microsoft was calling on these accounts. And worked my way up in the sales organization to eventually, by the time I left, leading a $1 billion business sales team for Microsoft.
20 years talked about already is like, for nowadays especially, is like almost unheard of.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons, it sounds like it was a perfect place for you. But at some point, it no longer was the right fit. What made you decide now is the time to jump and why?
It's more of a personal story than anything, because I could have stayed another 20 years and loved it. My career trajectory was going in the right direction. The people around me were phenomenal. I worked for a great manager. But my husband, who was also at Microsoft for 22 years, we met there on the company softball team. He got a really tough diagnosis in 2018. And that was like this moment. Here we were raising 3 kids, 2 ships passing in the night, traveling all the time. And then boom, we hit a wall because of Jeff's diagnosis. And thank God he's okay today. But at the time it led to conversations like, wow, what's important in life? And what's going to happen if it's just me with the kids and things like that. We didn't even tell our extended family because we weren't ready to share that information. So thankfully he got a little better, but turned into 2019. And we just said, our boys, we only have a few more years before they're off to college. We really want to focus on health. We want to focus on our family. And we decided to make the double jump to both exit Microsoft at the same time, and had set some goals previously about our finances that enabled us to do that, which we're really grateful for, and made the move. Jeff was very ready. I could have stayed, and I was a little bit sad in a way to leave, but it was the right thing, and I was also excited to do it.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting how on the outside, and you mentioned it, like it made me feel a little sad, but when you put your work or any life role under the lens of who you want to be at the end,
yes,
and then all of a sudden things become a little bit clearer. Even though it seems like it's the perfect right path, it may not actually be the right path. And it, of course, will help you get there. But as you reach those milestones, as you reach those goals, when you can look back and say, okay, the way that we're living, is this how we want to be? Is this how we want to be remembered by? Is this the life we want to actually, the person we want to become? Even though maybe we're doing something we love and it's fulfilling in those ways, is it also fulfilling the other pieces of our life that make us who we are? And sometimes they aren't.
Exactly. Is it all we want to be? And even though that time in 2018, 2019 was a really difficult time for us, dealing with the challenges, sometimes usually I think when bad things happen, really good things come out of it. And so for us, it was almost, as my friend Krista would say, a violent shove in the right direction to really slow down, because that was a big piece, slowing down when you're on this, high, intense trajectory, to slow down and really take stock of what's important, and to really sit back and say, what do we really want for our lives? What does that look like? And is what we're doing now putting us closer or further away from that? So it was a highly introspective time.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you will, I'd like to
Sure.
dive a little bit deeper into that.
Sure.
So you had the tough diagnosis, and then you said y'all both kind of like did some introspection and kind of reassess what's important. Can you be a little more specific? What did that actually look like? Did y'all do that together? Were you doing it separately? Were you having those conversations? Did you actually write things down? What was that process like?
Well, what's really interesting, if I can just step back briefly, when you're in a 20-year career, and I went through a lot of career stages or personal stages, from being 24 and single to I had 3 children while I was at Microsoft. So going through all the ups and downs of, do I go back to work? Do I stay at home? Am I doing a good job being a working parent? Am I not doing a good job? Feeling, and the ups and downs of, sometimes you have great years and you're feeling like you can conquer the world. And sometimes you're feeling like you can't do anything right. And but I would say over the past couple prior years, I was feeling this sense of a little bit of discontent. And I can't describe it because everything was great. The people around me were great. Our business was going well. Professionally, things were going well. But it just was something I couldn't ignore. I just had this feeling. At one point, I almost left Microsoft a few years earlier. I was getting recruited to lead a nonprofit for an organization that I'm really passionate about their cause. And then I was like, no, what am I doing? I can't do this. So there's already a little bit of discontent there. But I didn't understand why. When Jeff had his health issues, the conversations were, what do we want our life to be like? And have we really, even though we're really proud of the way we raised the boys, I can't say that we were always super present. We had our phones out all the time. The job was round the clock. And have we given them and done enough for them so that when Luca and then Matteo and then Ethan leave for college, they are totally equipped and we have no regrets? And are we? And we looked ourselves in the mirror and we said, you know what? Microsoft's a great place to work, but 2 executives at Microsoft, it was tough and it was a lot. And so we said, you know what? We need to pare this back. So that was really the genesis of it. I would say 10 years prior to that, Jeff said to me, hey, you know what? Let's work on our finances. Wouldn't it be cool if by the time we were 45, we were financially independent? And I wasn't even thinking that far ahead. He's like, yeah, then we can leave and do whatever we want. And I'm thinking, I'll never want to leave Microsoft. But okay, sure. And that was a goal we had. And we did a monthly business review, which is a very Microsoft thing. You do a business review. Every month we would sit down and we would say, did we achieve where we need to be? And ironically, I left when I was 44. Jeff was 46, and we had achieved that goal. So that had given us the ability to make those choices to both leave at the same time. But it was really about, you know what, there's just more of an impact I can make in a different way. And we really want to focus on making sure our kids are good. Our kids were fine. But looking back now, that last couple of years of Luca in high school where we were really able to focus on him, present. I think it made a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the framework going through yourself and using it in practice, and what you're hitting on, what we would talk about is values and purpose.
Yes.
And work is a piece of that, but so is family, and so is community, and so are all these things. And when one gets all the weight, the scale gets unbalanced. And that's, it sounds like what you're saying is the discontentment was a little bit of unbalance. And then coming back and saying, but who do I want to be? And what are my values? And we're not really living into these values over here. So let's kind of take a step back. And that's a big, for both of you all to do that. Even if you've prepared financially, it's still a big step and a scary step. How did you prepare for that? And then kind of where did that take you? Where are you now?
So how do we prepare? On the personal level, I said to Jeff, we've only ever known each other at Microsoft. Our kitchen table conversations revolve around that. We use acronyms. Our world is crazy, the way we outsource everything in our lives and then focus on ourselves, our kids, and Microsoft. But it works for us. That's all we know. And you know what? We have a happy marriage and things are good. My biggest fear is when we have more time on our hands, are we still going to grow together in the ways that are going to support our marriage and our family and grow? So that was a big fear of mine. So it's something we talked a lot about ahead of time and started talking about, like, what do you want out of this post-Microsoft world? What are you going to do that I have no interest in? What am I going to do? Yeah. And then what are we going to make sure we do together? What are our goals together? So that was really important. And then there was the importance of leaving Microsoft well. So I remember there were some financial things about when you notify Microsoft, and I worried for a second. I'm like, well, if I notify before September when
This
my
day,
stock
right.
vests and they walk me out the door, then I leave all this money on the table. Yet if I don't notify until after September, that's not honoring to my manager who has to deal with the repercussions. And so I went through this whole process and eventually just said, you know what, I'm just going to, somebody actually gave me really good advice. He said to me, you know what, what would leaving Microsoft, being the best person ever to leave Microsoft, what would that look like? And I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to go for. And so in August, I told my boss that I was planning on leaving. And I just said, I think it would be in Microsoft's best interest if we work on a good plan together that honors Microsoft and honors me. I think there's going to be some people that are going to be shocked that I'm leaving. And so let's do this together. And he agreed. He was amazing, Tyler Bryson. And together I was on for about almost 6 months. I helped hire my successor. We got the team ready. We made sure everybody felt good about things. And it was great for me personally. So that was really exciting and kind of taught me do things the right way. And maybe sometimes they don't work out, but usually they do.
Yeah.
So there was the process of leaving, then there was the personal side.
And so you left.
I left.
And then you did what?
I had this saying as I was leaving. So between August and December, I had this saying, I'm like, run through the tape. My track coach always told us most people, when they're getting to the end of the finish line, they see the tape and they kind of slow up,
down.
right? So he would always say, run through the tape because that little split second could really matter. So I was terrified that people at Microsoft would think I was just resting and investing. They announced me leaving in September and then I'm still around in December. Who does that? And so I just run through the tape. Like, you're finishing well is the most important thing. And I kept saying, my kids were like, stop saying run through the tape. It's so annoying. So I only tell you that to say I didn't really think a lot about what was after granularly until after I left on December 31st, 2019. When that happened, I thought, okay, I'm just going to take a second to breathe. Thankfully, my phone started ringing. Business partners, others that realized I left Microsoft, colleagues who I had known along the way, asked me to come work for them. And I'm like, no, I'm not getting back into that. But I had some interesting opportunities. I did some speaking engagements, and I started coaching, which is really my passion. And I told myself, you know what? I am going to give myself some time to try whatever comes my way and see what I enjoy doing. But coaching was always something that I love to do. It's a favorite part of my job at Microsoft. And so very quickly, I had my first client was back to Microsoft talking about leaving well. I left with 6 coaching clients, emerging leaders in the business who are all amazing. And since then have built a very healthy coaching practice of CEOs of small and mid-sized organizations and senior executives at large companies across industries. And it's extremely fulfilling.
That's so great. So while you were at Microsoft, were you someone who was always coaching others? And that, can you say is your passion? I'm assuming you found that after Microsoft, but can you look back now and see kind of how that was building towards this moment?
100%. I mean, I feel like what I've done a lot of introspection about since I've left Microsoft, now that I am a leadership coach, is what created my leadership approach and what I think makes it, I wouldn't say unique, but definitely maybe not as much a talked about point of view, is the focus on others. I mean, in my opinion, it was always about other people. So how do I get the best out of another person? Because I know what Jamie at 80% looks like. She's not bad, but she's not great.
Right.
And Jamie at 110%, what does that look like? I also know, having started my career at Microsoft, say, not as confident. I remember I was just a month in and Steve Ballmer, who was the former CEO of Microsoft, came to town. And somebody thought it was a good idea to give me the job of leading a customer roundtable with him. And so it was my first time ever leading a customer roundtable where I'm an MC and I have to lead.
Manage
so
all
I
these people, yeah.
prepped that. And then we got the customers in the room and I'm like, Steve, meet our customers. Who has the first question? And all of these CEOs clammed up. No one said a word. And I fumbled, John, you said that. I mean, I was sweating. It was terrible. The whole thing was average. And my job was to walk him to the next place. And I said, Steve, I'm so sorry that didn't go well. And he stopped. He physically stopped. And he's a big man. And he said to me, Jamie, I thought you did great. Everybody tends to get a little shy around me. So keep up the great work. And I thought to myself, man, like he had an opportunity to say something that would crush me,
Yeah.
potentially for years to come, but he encouraged me. And that's what I think leadership is all about. You encourage people to get the best out of them, and they have it within themselves to grow and be amazing. So that's what my leadership is all about.
If you want to discover how the Ideal Life's founder, Mark Condon, quit smoking, shed 80 pounds, established a thriving logistics company, and embraced the challenges of becoming an Ironman triathlete, all thanks to the framework we referenced in today's episode, order your copy of his inspiring book, The Ideal Life, today with their website or any major retailer. Begin your journey towards a fulfilling life filled with purpose and achievement. So you jump into this new world of coaching.
Yes.
It's obviously new, but not totally new. Like you said, you've been doing it, but all of a sudden you got to put yourself out there a little bit, even though you have these people that know you, but now you're a coach. You go from executive to coach. Was that weird? Was that normal? Did you not think about it?
It felt completely natural to me, honestly. I think because my first set of clients were all in the tech industry. And the first set of clients, particularly at Microsoft, were people who were a little bit earlier in career than I had been. It was really comfortable. I know exactly where you've come from. I know all the lingo and logistics of Microsoft. So I was able to hone my more professional coaching skills that I had learned earlier. Microsoft had actually sent me to a class for it. So some of the technical components, hone it there. Where it got a little nervous for me was one day, and then I, started coaching other tech executives, and that felt like a good crossover. And then one day, somebody introduced me to the CEO of a small-sized community development organization, a CDFI finance organization. And I thought, how am I going to coach the CEO of a finance organization? Like, this is not my area of expertise, but I'll meet with him, sure. And we hit it off immediately. And what I realized was, he didn't need a coach to help him figure out what kind of lending he needed to do or what the market was saying. He was an expert in that.
Yeah.
What he needed help with was how to make sure he was bringing his team along. He was relatively new in role. They weren't kind of, I guess, getting along all that great. Yeah. And how do you move things forward? So that felt very natural. Oh, well, I love doing that. That's my favorite thing to do, is get small, mighty teams to do outsized things and to get people excited for the work, not because they have to do it because it's their job, not because they have to do it for you because it's their boss, but because they want to do it. You've inspired something in them that brings out the best in them. That all felt natural. And what I started realizing over time was that is exactly what so many really accomplished, amazing senior leaders in organizations that are great at their craft struggle with, particularly as they make transitions into more senior roles. So my favorite kind of clients are newly promoted CEOs that are working on that transition and things like that. So I still do coaching in the tech sector, which feels extremely natural.
Right.
But these other industries, it translates beautifully.
So you mentioned how a lot of leaders that are newly promoted, they don't have, oftentimes they're not really great at leading folks or leading culture or getting the most out of them. Why do you think that is in businesses? What are we not doing in a business when we promote someone, or why are we not preparing them? What are we not doing that we could so when they get to that level, they have a better idea of how to do that?
Great question. There's a couple of reasons, I think. I think that there's some natural inflection points in leadership growth in a typical size organization, for example, that fundamentally have to take a shift of the way you think and the way you work. One is moving from an individual contributor, where it's all about self-leadership, to your first-time manager role, right? That takes a big shift. Another one is going from a first-time manager to now leading other managers or leading leaders. That's about how do you amplify your impact through others, and that takes a whole different mindset. I see a lot of leaders there get stuck around, well, what do I do now? If somebody else is doing it, where do I add value, right? And then as you go up the chain, then it's more about how do I make sure we have the right culture so that the things that are important to me and the tone that I want to set gets done. And it's not about the tactical execution of that. And here, for example, like at a CEO level, or a senior leadership team level, what are the values, right? What are the big things that we want to be known for? Because you're not going to be able to create an SOP, a standard operating procedure for everything that you want to do. You want to set the tone so that people act a certain way all the time, and that you reinforce the behaviors, and that your leadership team models the behaviors. So those are the big things. When we promote people, we usually do it because they're really good at what they did before. Exactly. Yeah. And we don't necessarily always equip them with
the tools
to get to the next level. And then on top of that, the second pitfall is everybody pretends like it's super easy, right? So
because you're supposed to know how to do it.
You're supposed to know how to do it. I mean, I've worked with CEOs who will confess to me that they feel like a little nervous, right? But who are they going to tell they're nervous to? Well, it's because nobody tells them what's normal, right? But I think that's the big thing. They look around and they might look to somebody and say, that's who I aspire to be. But that person doesn't share with humility the mistakes that they've made or where they're going. They just want to put their best foot forward. And then that person sits back and says, well, I don't know how that person does it, but I'm not sure I have it in me.
Right. When in reality, I feel the same way.
Right. And so, I went through this process around discovering my purpose really first as a favor to a friend who wanted feedback on their model. And it turned out to be transformational to me because my mantra out of my purpose is love and encourage. And the way I do that is loving on leaders and encouraging them to recognize that they can grow and that the answers they have are inside of them. And all those people they aspire to be that they see, they never started out perfect. And so we're on a journey and let's go. So pulling out of them the things that they need to do to get to the next level.
Yeah. How do you... you talked about goals a lot with you and your husband and you professionally. And it's easy to see when you hit goals when they're numbers based specifically. But when you're talking about a leader growing in kind of an intangible way, which is like leading through other people, how do the folks, the CEOs or senior leadership that you're coaching through, how do they see their success to say, okay, I am this is working. Like we're getting somewhere. This is making sense to me. Because you can point to numbers, but that doesn't mean they're growing. How do you help them see that visual kind of feedback, if you will?
It's an art and a little bit of a science. I would say I get really granular with each person I work with so that we understand what do you want to work on and what are the goals and what would it look like what does it look like when we achieve that? And we don't always exactly get to exactly the right place, but we can measure it. I'll give you one example. One of the CEOs I was working with wasn't feeling great about the relationship that he had with his board. He's like, I think they support me, but I'm not sure. I don't really feel like I have raving fans, not sure. And I said, well, what do you want to work on? And he's like, my messaging and how I communicate. Like, great, let's work on that. And I'll never forget, one of the highlights of my last year was I had helped this person work on their messaging platform. Now, I didn't know half of what he was talking about because I didn't understand his industry very deeply. I knew enough, but what I was helping him with was how to communicate it in a way that would really excite his audience, which is a skill that I have from Microsoft. And he worked on it, delivered his board presentation. And Friday at 4 p.m., I get this text. Jamie, I knocked it out of the park. It was incredible. Thanks so much. That text probably fueled me for the next month. That's why I do what I do. And that's the exciting part. So can you measure it? I don't know. I'm going to say we measured that, right?
Yeah,
that was a really big transformational moment between him and the board where he had identified we have this issue and now he's got a new trajectory for that.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how when you were with Microsoft, you were the way that I kind of think about it, and you probably heard this saying, is like when I get home often, not all the time, but I find myself sometimes my family gets the leftovers.
Yes.
So you pour yourself out and you get home and you're like, oh, I'm done. And they get the leftovers, which is not how I want to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
And many people feel the same way. And then when you reevaluate your values and you end up where you are now, I imagine there's a lot of folks thinking similarly. And they're thinking too about this whole new coaching kind of, not craze, but we're more, as a culture, we're more accepting of a need for help.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's counseling, whether that's coaching, whatever it is. I think we actually see that that's a good thing. We need growth and we need people to help us there. And I think a lot of folks are wanting to step out into this world of whether it's life coaching or wealth management or executive coaching, fitness coaching, whatever it is, like coaching in their expertise. What advice would you give them for how do you jump into that space? What'd that look like for someone?
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to say, probably a lot of those people that are there need to give themselves a little bit of grace. If you're feeling like you're giving your leftovers, I felt that all the time, right? All the time. I felt like there was more I could do. And there probably was. And after I had more time, there was more I was doing. But you know what? My kids were doing great. I was doing a lot. So I would just say give yourself some grace for that. For me, what I think makes a great coach, I couldn't have been a great coach 10 years ago. I had to learn a lot myself. And the coaching industry is most coaches will tell you, especially if you believe in generative coaching, which I do, that each person has the answers inside of them, and your job is to really listen well and to really be ask the right questions to help them come to that aha moment. Like when you ask a great question, I'm like, oh yeah, like that aha moment. Yet I would add to that. I agree with all of that, but I would add also having experience where you can bring a little bit more frame, I think is where my clients get extra help, and sometimes I'll jump out on my coaching. I'm like, what? I think I was in a situation just like yours. Is it okay if I jump out and share some ideas? And they're always like, yes, right? And it takes it to a new level. So I would say hone your craft, really understand the value that you can bring first. So that's my first thing. The other thing I would say is, why do you want to be a coach? If it's for yourself, then I'm not sure. That doesn't work for me, right? I think you are a coach if you really care about helping other people be successful. I hold things very loosely. I don't have a website. People laugh at me because I still use my Hotmail account for my email. I'm very retro, right? I'm not focused on marketing because I get a lot of clients via word of mouth. And when I meet somebody, I'm looking for a fit. Is this a good fit for you? Do I feel like I can make an impact for you? And if I don't, I'm going to pass you on to somebody else, right? Because it's all about you getting what you need. It's not about me. I also tell my clients, when we're done, we'll both know it, and you tell me if this isn't working. So it's got to be about the other person all the time. So those are the big tests.
Yeah, I think it's good. And it goes back to values and his work. I think that in our work life, we want, by nature, I'm a golfer, and you look at like the PGA Tour and Live Golf, all stuff happening. And I always think about like, okay, they're offering someone to work less and make more money. If you look at just that, you're like, of course, people are going to choose that. Who doesn't want to work less and have more money? Like I think, and more time, like all those things, those three things, like everyone would like sign me up for that, right? And I think the coaching industry, to a lot of people, it seems to answer that question. And you can work from wherever and all those things. But I think what you're saying is, if it's not aligning with their values, which is really helping others or whatever it might be, then it's not the right move, and it won't actually fill you up, and you'll still feel all the same things you're feeling. I'll never forget like great advice I had someone gave me when my wife and I got married really young. And I remember we weren't having problems, but I remember someone saying this about relationships in general, which is, don't get married and think that your problems will be solved because you're married. Or don't change jobs and think that all the problems you have will just be solved by a new job. It's the same kind of mentality, right? Like whatever problems you bring into the new job, it's going to be there. And of course, the jobs will open up opportunities, but the problems aren't just going to be solved by this new thing. Which I think is, it's another way of saying the grass isn't always greener, I guess, in some ways.
Yes.
But I would argue, like you're saying, it's got to align with, if you want to be a coach, it's so that what will happen. Is it going to make you the person that you want to be? Like, is that helping on that path? If not, it's not going to provide the desired outcome. It 100%. May have more money and it may have more free time, but it's not going to ultimately give you what you're looking for, which I think is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I spent the holidays obsessing. My friends from Microsoft will know my big thing was customer obsession. Are we really obsessing over? I was obsessing over a couple of my clients, obsessing over how this last meeting that I had right before the holidays, I should have answered that one question better. I should have pursued something better for that one CEO that I work with who's amazing. What am I going to research that's going to bring new insight to that person? So it's not there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? So yes, the flexibility is phenomenal. I love having more control over my life to be able to structure things so that I can never miss a soccer game. I never miss a soccer game anymore. I tell my clients that. I'm like, if you're ever trying to reschedule me, never missing a soccer game. But the boards that I'm on, sorry, I can't fly out to San Francisco this quarter because there's a soccer game. And that's something that I'm going to do for the next couple of years. So that part is fantastic. But there's a lot of work that goes on to truly giving yourself to somebody and tying your success to their success. And then when you get those emails, if you're the type of person that would fly high for 30 days after the type of email that I got, maybe coaching is for you.
Yeah. It's clear you value family. It's clear you value work. It's clear you value others and community. Where do you think those values come from?
Everything that I do and everything is core to my faith. So, and it's funny, I've started to even record all my leadership thoughts over the past couple of years since I've left Microsoft. And it's interesting the story that they tell and how, well, even though I wasn't purposeful in creating, like someone says, what's your leadership philosophy? I never had that as I was building it. It's only looking back that you look back and you say, oh yeah, there it is. And then you hone things. But deeply tied to my faith, just the way I view people. Everybody's, created in the image of God. And so everybody has worth and is special. Everybody on your team, everybody that you interact with, and so those are really the cornerstone and the foundation of my values. I think also I came from a really strong family upbringing. My mom was amazing. My dad was amazing, sisters. So I'm really fortunate for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned travel with your family. Is that something that, well, tell me how that plays into your values in your life? Because travel's awesome. It can also be challenging and all of those things. How does that play in with how you raise your kids and how you do life, how you find margin, all those things?
So I am very big on everything mindset. I really, the older I get, the more I realize like every battle is in your mind. And so back in 2014 at Microsoft, we were sort of a slow company. My kids didn't think Microsoft was cool. And Satya Nadella came on board and he brought in Carol Dweck's growth mindset into the entire culture of the organization. And I embraced it. I loved it. I'm like, yes, I feel like this is already how I think, but now I have a framework for understanding and to really practice it. And in practicing it along with other leaders at Microsoft, I literally experienced how mindset change can completely turn around a company. I mean, since Satya Nadella came on board, I think the stock price is up at least 10 times, maybe 15 times, right? And people will say, oh, it's because they put out new products. No, it started with a mindset change that led to everything else that we do. And so that is a really big thing for me. Curiosity is at the heart of a growth mindset. So I'm extremely curious. My husband says I have a hard time saying no, which is probably true, but there's such curiosity in every new person that I meet, every new opportunity, and travel is a big part of that. So Jeff and I were very intentional, especially after we left Microsoft. We want to expose them to all different parts of the world. We want them to see different cultures. We want them to experience different things. We want them to ask questions. So we've taken them to every continent. We were just in Japan last summer. We were in Egypt the summer before, Australia. And, the kinds of questions you get from when your son, is looking around and he's like, I don't understand why women wear head coverings in Egypt. Is that something disrespectful to them? And he goes and asks our guide, and the guide explains about the culture significance of that and how it is such a beautiful part of their culture. And also he can kind of weigh in what's going on in the world. Those moments are absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
So that's why we travel, and we're going to continue doing it to expose them and to give them a bigger perspective.
Yeah, curiosity. My son is sometimes like, can you stop being so curious? Because I'm worn out by all the questions. But yeah, it's such for a growth mindset versus fixed mindset. You can't grow if you're not curious, and you can't grow if you're not met with a challenge. And sometimes those goes hand in hand, and they're always not the same things. I mean, you can have a challenge and then not be curious about what to do now.
Yes,
but they go hand in hand. And I think as we pursue the people that we want to be, more curiosity, I think it's important. How have you, as a mom, how have you helped instill that, other than traveling, of course?
Mm-hmm.
How have you instilled that in your children, if you have? It sounds like it's
Oh,
a big core of
100%.
your family.
2014 was in the relative early days of me raising my family as well. My son was 9 when I was exposed to growth mindset. 9, 7, and 5 were my kids, right? So they will roll their eyes to this day. They're like, oh, growth mindset again, got it. But think about it on the soccer field, right? Perfect story. It does not relate to soccer, but my son, Mateo, wanted to be in the school play when he was, I don't know, in 6th grade. He was a soccer star. And then he wanted to try out for the play. I said, what are you going to try out for? He's like, Mowgli. That's the lead in the Jungle
In the
Book.
Jungle Book,
The
yeah.
lead. I was like, I've never heard you dance, sing, act. He's like, I'm going to do it. I'm like, great, go for it. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh man, this isn't going to be good. Well, then he came home and he was all mad because he didn't get Mowgli. You might be surprised to hear. He got one of the 10 elephants, right? And so I said, great, go have fun being an elephant. And by the way, if you want to get the lead in the play next year, I'll happily support you in acting lessons and singing lessons. If you want to put in the time and effort, you can probably grow and get better anyway. Like, want to try it? And he said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, great. Then go enjoy being an elephant and have a great time. Focus on what you're going to be successful. How would you feel if Hunter, who did get the lead and he was fantastic, how would you feel if he came and took your starting spot on the soccer team, never having kicked a soccer ball, right? So these are the ways I raised my kids. I never let them feel like a victim. So something bad happens. I'm like, great, that's terrible. What are you going to do about it? What are some options that we have? How are you thinking differently? I just told my son, who is a freshman in college, and he's starting to think about internships this summer. And it's difficult for a freshman to find an internship. He's in finance. And I said, start networking with everybody you know. He's like, oh, I'm not sure if it'll lead to anything. I said, but if you do nothing, it definitely won't. Go open a bunch of doors.
You miss 100% of shots you don't take.
Worst case scenario, you learn something. You get better at interviewing. You get better at experiencing things. And he's like, okay, I got it. Growth mindset, mom. I'm like, exactly. So we talk about it a lot. And Jeff was at Microsoft as well. So he's really trained in it. So I think that's the number one thing. And hopefully we're raising really resilient kids that are courageous and curious, and we'll use it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about them kind of rolling their eyes or rehearsing it back. Has there been a time where you've like kind of seen them exhibit it or talk about it on their own, and you're like, oh, you got it finally, or there it is? Kind of that aha moment as a mom of like, oh, finally, now it's a part of who you are, or have you just seen them over time? It just becomes so much of who they are, they don't even know it. It's just like the normal steps they take just kind of exhibit that mindset.
Yeah, when teenagers say, growth mindset, I think they actually get it. And it's meaning that's triggered for them, like it's in their head. So I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
But more so to answer your question, they do that sometimes. They mock me. But more so I just see it in the way they are. Ethan didn't make the basketball team. He was maybe in 7th grade, and he was like one of 2 people that got cut. Like everybody else made it and he didn't. I was like, oh, how are you feeling? Are you sad? He's like, no, I'm terrible. Like, of course they cut me. I'm fine. I said, do you want to work on it? He's like, nah, I don't really like it. I was just going to do it because my friends were. He's like, I'm going to work on soccer. Great.
Perfect.
Giving this idea that you're not born with something. You can either work on it and get better and pursue a goal, or we have limited time. You could choose not to and just let that go. Right?
Yeah.
So,
which is kind of counterculture in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And culture is do all the things and do them all really, really well and be the best at all of them and have no time, no margin, and good luck.
That's right.
And as a parent, it's hard to fight back against that, I think, because and as parents, you see our kids and you say, God, you are talented in all these areas. And so you want to get them, we know that they'll be joyful when they are successful, right?
That's absolutely right.
But also we know that when there's no time for anything else in themselves, they're not going to be successful in anything.
Well, and failure too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of the best growth I've had is through a failure. And I don't like to fail. Do you like to fail?
No one likes to
it's
fail.
terrible. It feels terrible. But some of the best growth comes out of it and the learning comes out of it. Right?
Can you think of one? Like what can you think back of like what a big failure that turned in that really helped you take a next step in some way?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a good business example, and I was leading the US CRM business, the customer relationship management business for Microsoft way back, maybe in like 2006 or 7. And it was right when CRM Online was one of the only online business business products, pre-SaaS, So there were some major mistakes that we made and that I made, and we were slow and we didn't transform fast enough. We eventually did okay, but it was slow. Years later, they gave me the ERP, sort of the financial and back office, solutions business to run. And right when we were launching an online product, and nobody thought that anybody would put their financials in the cloud, right? No one's going to do that.
Right. So
and I
unsafe.
thought,
Who would do that? Yeah.
Oh no, we have to be all in on this, because I learned being half in with CRM that did not work.
Yeah.
So it's either all in or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you take that learning and that failure and we pushed hard. And the first year, I'm happy to spend more time, but it's probably not as relevant. We did 74% of our new business in the cloud compared to the rest of the world at 4%. Just because we focused on it. We didn't say there's options. We're going all in and we're going to fix what's broken. And we're going to do it fast, and we're going to pull off the Band-Aid. That was a huge learning that was leapfrogged our business in the US and made it really successful. Probably one of the most fun times. Anybody who's listening to this that was on the team at that time, woo, that was a good time.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were, in order to have a growth mindset, you have to be someone who desires to grow in general.
Yes.
Which sounds like that you were that person anyways. Can you think back to, like you said, support a family? Were you raised in a way where failure wasn't promoted, but failure was not the end of the world? Did your family help you take those opportunities and turn them into successes? Where did your love or passion, or even like looking at failure as opportunity, where did that come from? Do you think?
I think my parents. My mom was a little bit more conservative, but she would always push and support me to try whatever I wanted to try. And she was a single mom and would go out of her way always, at her own expense to drive me here or there to pursue anything. So that was amazing. And it was my dad's mindset. I remember my dad, when we decided to move to Charleston, it was completely on a whim. And when we when we decided to do it, I was like, Dad, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is crazy. I'm not even sure if Microsoft is going to love it long term. And he goes, Jamie, it's not like a tattoo that's permanent. If you don't like it, move back. And I'm like, yeah.
That's
so
great
that was
advice.
my dad, the type of advice I would always get from my dad, which was, you make a mistake, move on. So I think I got it from there. And then seeing it inside a company and watching it, how it could change the trajectory of an organization. When you create the environment where you don't lop off somebody's head if they make a mistake, which was not necessarily what Microsoft used to be. And so when you give people the freedom to experiment, to learn from their mistakes and move on, the kind of innovation that unlocks, that's where it gets really exciting from a business perspective. And I love talking to leaders about incorporating a growth mindset culture to drive business transformation and business results. So I'm transforming my family, and also the transformation on the business results as well.
Yeah, I think from a business standpoint, and you get on one hand, like freedom to fail, that culture, you understand how you can understand like why that exists, because obviously numbers are numbers and you need revenue growth and you need those things. And sometimes those failures lead to big issues. But we also know that those failures tend to lead to other things as well. So you can understand how that culture starts. I would imagine changing that culture is difficult, is super challenging. And I would imagine starts from the top, but not always, but most of the time, right? How have you seen some companies go from a bad culture to a good culture? What is the number one driving factor for a company kind of culture change?
I have a strong point of view that for it to work well, it has to start at the top. because everything has to be reinforced. I'll give you a great example of Microsoft and then a quick example of a current client, right? So at Microsoft always had a great culture. I was always proud to work there. I was always going to carry a bag that said Microsoft on it, even when people in the airport were like telling me all the things I didn't like about Microsoft. So I don't want it, when I say these things, I don't want it to sound like I'm disparaging Microsoft, but Microsoft got better. It was not as good and it got better, right? The culture prior to growth mindset was very much an expert culture. So I would be running a couple $100 million business. I would go into my monthly business review and I would prepare like crazy. And I would say, all right, I'm going to keep the focus over here, look over here at all the great things we're doing. Please don't ask me about these things I don't want to talk about. I need 30 more days to fix them. We're going to do a dance. And then I got out and I said, phew, made it through another month, right? Come new growth mindset culture, the business review goes like this. I'm very proud of the team. Here's all the things that are going really well. Here's a couple areas that we're not doing as well as we thought. Here's what we tried. They didn't work out the way we wanted to. Here's what we're doing about it. Does anybody else have any suggestions for me? Okay. Think about the difference. What starts to happen? Bad news starts traveling fast. You start getting more collaboration. But the leadership at the top has to reward that behavior. They have to say, we're going to reward the Jamie Tozzi that knows her business so well that she's going to point out the flaws, not the Jamie Tozzi that just does a great song and dance and knows how to hide the bad stuff, right? And so you can say you have a growth mindset culture, but if you don't reinforce it from the top through all the activities, it folds like a deck of cards. So
that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun, Hudson. I love what you're doing, and congratulations to your success.
Thanks so much.